The phone rang at 7:41 on a cold Tuesday morning, not the kind of call a farmer likes to get before sunrise. Tom Walker had been farming long enough to know that when the equipment dealer calls that early, something is wrong. He was sitting at the old wooden kitchen table, the same table that had been in the farmhouse for nearly 60 years. Steam from his coffee drifted toward the window, while the farm radio quietly reported soybean futures. The caller ID read, "Henderson Equipment, Tom." Frowned, he picked up the phone. Tom Walker speaking. A cheerful voice answered immediately. "Good morning, Mr. Walker. This is Dave from Henderson Equipment. I'm just calling to confirm delivery for your 2 John Deere 6R tractors scheduled for Friday." Tom blinked. "Delivery of what?" There was a pause. "The 2 6R 1-75 tractors you ordered yesterday afternoon. We just want to make sure the trade-in paperwork for your old tractors is ready." Tom slowly set his coffee cup down. For a moment, he thought maybe he had misheard. "Dave," he said carefully, "I think there's been some mistake, sir. I didn't order any tractors." Another pause. "Well, the order came through your farm account. 2 units, full precision agriculture package, GPS guidance, loader, attachments, financing already pre-approved." Tom felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "How much?" he asked. "Total package comes to about $318,000, financed over 7 years. Stay with me until the end. Before we begin, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it." The number hung in the air, $318,000. Tom leaned back in his chair slowly. "Dave," he said quietly, "listen to me very carefully." "Yes, sir?" "I did not authorize that order. I did not approve any financing. And I definitely did not agree to spend $300,000 on tractors." Silence filled the line. "Well, sir, the order was placed from the farm. Email we have on file." Tom closed his eyes, because suddenly he knew exactly what had happened. His daughter. "Dave," he said, his voice steady now, "don't prepare anything. Don't deliver anything. I'll call you back later today." "Yes, sir." Tom hung up the phone and sat there staring at the wall. A framed photograph hung above the kitchen cabinet. His father stood beside an old tractor in the picture, arms crossed, dirt on his boots, the look of a man who had survived hard years. Tom had grown up hearing one lesson repeated over and over again. Never let debt own your farm, because once the bank owns your equipment, it won't be long before it owns your land. Tom slowly stood up. Outside, the wind moved across the fields like a quiet warning, and somewhere out in the machine shed, his daughter Emily was already working. Of course she was. Emily Walker was 29, years old, and had been running most of the daily operations on the farm for the last 3 years. She was smart, organized, determined, and if she had ordered 2 brand new tractors without telling him, then she had already made up her mind. Tom walked across the yard, boots crunching on gravel. Inside the machine shed, the smell of diesel and grease filled the air. Emily stood beside the planter, sleeves rolled up, wiping hydraulic fittings with a rag. Her dark hair was tied in a ponytail, and her work boots were covered in yesterday's mud. She looked up when Tom entered, and in that instant, she knew. "You got the call," she said. Tom stopped a few feet away. "Yes," he replied calmly. Emily didn't look surprised. "They're good tractors," she said. "We need them." Tom studied her for a long moment. "You ordered them?" "Yes, just one word, but it landed like a punch. You put this farm $300,000 in debt without even talking to me." Emily's jaw tightened. "I've been trying to talk to you about upgrading equipment for 2 years. That's not the same thing as buying tractors behind my back." Her eyes flashed. "Behind your back? Dad, I've been begging you to have this conversation since 2021. You don't make a decision like that without the person whose name is on the land." The words came out sharper than he intended. Emily's face turned pale. "Right," she said quietly. "I guess I'm just the hired help then. That's not what I meant." "That's exactly what you meant." She threw the rag onto the workbench. "I'm the one running this farm every day. I'm the one fixing equipment at midnight during harvest. I'm the one planning planting schedules and handling grain contracts. Her voice shook slightly. "But when it comes to real decisions, suddenly it's your farm again." Tom felt his temper rising, but he forced it down. Anger wouldn't solve anything. "Come to the house," he said. "We're going to talk about this properly." Emily crossed her arms. "You're going to cancel the order?" "Yes." "Dad, that's not a discussion." For a moment they stood there staring at each other across the concrete floor of the shed. Then Tom turned and walked back toward the farmhouse. Emily followed a few minutes later. They sat down at the kitchen table. The same old table where 3 generations of Walkers had made decisions about crops, equipment, and survival. Emily opened her laptop. Of course she had prepared. Spreadsheets filled the screen. Repair records, equipment logs, maintenance costs. She turned the laptop toward him. "Let me show you something." Tom leaned back in his chair. "Go." "Ahead." Emily pointed at the first spreadsheet. "Last year we spent $15,400 repairing the old tractors." She clicked to the next page. "Year before that, $13,800. Another clicks. "Year before that, $12,900. Tom nodded slowly. "Equipment needs maintenance." "Yes," she said. "But this isn't maintenance anymore." She brought up another chart. "Our 2 main tractors are 32 and 35 years old, still running, barely." She looked him directly in the eyes. "We had 6 breakdowns during planting last year." Tom didn't reply. "Because," he remembered, 1 hydraulic failure, 2 electrical issues, a clutch problem that shut them down for 2 days. Emily continued. "Those breakdowns cost us time, and time costs yield." She tapped the laptop again. "These new tractors solve that." She began listing features. 70 horsepower, precision GPS, fuel efficiency improvements, modern hydraulics. Tom listened quietly. Then he asked one question. "How much are the payments?" Emily hesitated. Then she answered. "About $4,400 a month." Tom let out a slow breath. "That's $53,000 a year." "Yes." "For 7 years." "Yes. And what happens if we have a drought?" Emily leaned forward. "We have crop insurance. What happens if prices crash? We hedge contracts. What happens if both happen at the same time?" She didn't answer immediately. Tom stood up and walked to a cabinet. He opened a drawer and pulled out an old folder. The papers inside were yellow with age. He placed them on the table. "Do you know what this is?" Emily shook her head. "My equipment loan from 1986. She frowned. "You've told me that story." "No," Tom said. "I told you the short version." He slid one paper across the table. "Bought a brand new tractor that year." Emily read. The number $87,000. "For that time," Tom said quietly. "That was a huge purchase." "What happened?" "The next year, the drought came." He tapped another paper. "Crop yield reports. Corn production cut nearly in half. Soybeans worse." "I couldn't make the payments." Emily looked up slowly. "What did the bank do?" "They gave me 6 months." "And then?" Tom gave a small, tired smile. "Then they told me they'd take the tractor." Emily sat silently. "I sold it for $40,000 less than I owed," Tom continued, "and I spent 5 years paying the difference." The kitchen went quiet. Finally, Emily spoke. "That was 40 years ago." Tom nodded. "Yes. But drought still happens. Markets still crash. And banks still take farms." Emily stared at the papers for a long moment. Then she closed the laptop slowly. "So, what do you want to do?" she asked. Tom folded his hands. "I want 2 weeks." "For what?" "To show you another way." Emily raised an eyebrow. "You're going to magically buy tractors without money?" Tom smiled slightly. "No, but I might buy them without debt." Emily studied his face carefully. Finally, she sighed. 2 weeks. Tom nodded. 2 weeks. Outside, the wind moved across the fields again, and neither of them realized yet that those 2 weeks were about to decide the future of the farm. Tom Walker didn't waste time. The morning after the argument, he woke up before sunrise the way he always had. 46 years of farming had trained his body to wake up long before the alarm clock. The house was quiet. Emily's truck was already gone. She had headed out to check the south field before daylight. Tom poured himself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table. But instead of reading grain reports, he opened his laptop and started searching used equipment listings, farm auctions, dealer inventory, private sales, anything within a 3-state radius. Because if he was going to prove a point to his daughter, he needed more than just words. He needed tractors, real ones, affordable ones, and he needed them fast. For the next 2 days, Tom did something he hadn't done seriously in over a decade. He studied the used equipment market like a man preparing for war. He tracked auction results, he read service records, he called old contacts, farmers he'd known for years, mechanics who understood machines better than the dealerships did. What he discovered surprised even him. The market was full of tractors, good ones, machines only 10 or 12 years old, selling for a fraction of their original price because the industry had changed. Farmers were chasing bigger equipment now, newer models, more technology, which meant perfectly capable tractors were quietly leaving farms and going to auction yards. Tom leaned back in his chair and smiled slightly. Maybe Emily wasn't entirely wrong about upgrading equipment, but she was wrong about how to do it. 3 days later, he climbed into his old pickup truck and drove 2 hours north to a farm auction. The sky was clear and cold, the kind of early spring morning that still carried winter in. The auction yard was already crowded. Farmers walked between rows of machinery, inspecting engines and kicking tires. Tom moved slowly down the line. Combines, planters, sprayers. Then finally he saw what he had come for. A green tractor parked near. The end of the row, a John Deere 7230, not brand new, but far from worn out. He checked the hour meter. 460 hours. That was barely broken in. Tom crouched beside the engine and opened the side panel. Clean, no leaks, maintenance stickers from a dealership. He nodded to himself. A man standing nearby spoke. Good machine. Tom turned. It was a mechanic he recognized. Morning, Jim. Jim Hutchins had been repairing tractors in 3 counties for nearly 40 years. If Jim said a machine was good, it usually was. Transmission solid, Jim said. Owner kept. It maintained. Traded up to a bigger model last year. Tom looked back at the tractor. What do you think it'll sell for? Jim shrugged. Maybe 50. Tom smiled slightly. That was less than 1/6 the price of the tractors Emily had ordered. The auction began an hour later. Bidders gathered around the tractor. The auctioneer climbed onto a small platform and began the rapid-fire rhythm that echoed across every auction yard in America. All right, folks, we've got a 2012 John Deere 7230 here. Good, clean tractor. Who'll start me at $30,000? Hands went up. The bidding climbed quickly. 32, 35, 38. Tom stayed quiet. He had learned long ago that patience wins auctions. At 42,000, the crowd started thinning. 2 bidders remained. One farmer in a blue jacket and Tom, 43. 44. The man in the blue jacket hesitated. The auctioneer pointed. 44,000. Do I hear 45? Tom raised his hand. 45. The other bidder shook his head. Going once. Going twice. Sold. Tom exhaled slowly. $45,000. He had just bought his first tractor, but he wasn't finished yet. 2 days later, he drove south to look at another machine. This time, it was a Case IH Puma owned by a retiring farmer. The owner was an older man named Harold. They stood beside the tractor in Harold's barn. You selling because you're retiring? Tom asked. Harold nodded. Kids moved to the city. He patted the tractor's fender. Good machine, though. Tom inspected it carefully. The engine ran smooth. Hydraulics responded instantly. Tires were nearly new. How much are you asking? Tom said, 62. Tom crossed his arms. Would you take 55? Harold smiled. 58. Tom thought about it. Then he extended his hand. Deal. 2 tractors. Total cost. $103,000 paid in cash, and the farm still had money left in the operating account. When Tom drove back into the farmyard the next afternoon, Emily was repairing a planter wheel near the shed. She looked up as the truck pulled in, then she saw the trailers and the tractors behind them. Her eyebrows rose slowly. Tom parked and stepped out. Emily walked around the machines in silence. She inspected the tires, opened the cab door, checked the hour meter. Finally, she turned toward him. "You bought tractors?" "Yes." "How much?" $103,000. Emily blinked. "For both." She climbed into the John Deere cab and started the engine. It purred smoothly. She tested the hydraulics. Everything worked perfectly. After a few minutes, she climbed down. "These are good tractors," she admitted. Tom nodded. "They'll handle every implement we own." Emily crossed her arms. "But they're not new. No, they're not GPS ready. We can install that later. They're still used equipment." Tom leaned against the tractor tire. "Yes, but they're ours." Emily looked at him quietly. "No payments," he continued. "No bank. No risk of losing the farm if we have a bad year." The wind moved across the fields again. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Emily sighed. "You spent most of our operating reserve." "Not most. Enough. But we still have no debt." She looked at the tractors again, then back at her father. "I wanted us to farm like a modern operation." Tom nodded. "And we will, just without the bank owning half our equipment." Emily leaned against the tractor wheel. "You know what the frustrating part is?" "What?" "You might actually be right." Tom chuckled quietly. "Don't sound so disappointed." Before she could answer, a pickup truck pulled into the driveway. Their neighbor Mark stepped out. Mark farmed nearly twice as much land as they did. He walked over, glancing at the tractors. "New equipment?" he asked. "New to us," Tom replied. Mark nodded. "Looks good." Then he hesitated. "You hear about Steve Miller?" Tom frowned. "No. Bank took his combine yesterday." Emily looked up sharply. "What?" Mark shrugged. 2 bad crop years and a big equipment loan. The words hung in the air. Tom and Emily exchanged a glance, because suddenly the argument from a few days earlier didn't feel theoretical anymore. It felt real, very real. Mark climbed back into his truck and drove away. Emily watched the dust settle behind him, then she looked at the tractors again. Finally, she spoke quietly. "That could have been us." Tom nodded. "Yes." Emily took a long breath. "I'm sorry I ordered those tractors without telling you. And I'm sorry I didn't explain sooner why I hate debt." She smiled slightly. "You don't hate debt." "Oh, yes, I do." "You fear it," Tom thought. "About that?" Then nodded. "Yes." They stood beside the tractors as the sun began to set across the fields. Emily finally said something Tom hadn't expected. "When you retire someday." Tom looked at her. "I'll probably run things a little differently," he smiled. "I expect you will. But one thing I promise." "What's that?" "I'll never forget why you cancelled that order." Tom nodded slowly. "Because some lessons you don't learn from spreadsheets. You learn them from surviving, and sometimes from saying no to a $300,000 tractor." Spring arrived slowly that year. Kansas winters never leave quietly. Even in late March, the morning still carried frost across the fields, and the wind cut through jackets like it had something to prove. But planting season was coming, and for the first time in months, Tom Walker felt something close to calm. The tractors were ready. Both machines had been cleaned, serviced, and parked side by side in the machine shed. Emily had spent 3 full days going over every detail, like a mechanic inspecting a race car before a championship. Filters changed. Hydraulic lines checked, every bolt tightened. Even Tom had to admit something quietly to himself. His daughter was good at this. Really good. On a cold Monday morning, Emily climbed into the John Deere and turned the key. The engine started instantly. No hesitation, no grinding starter. Just the steady, confident rumble of a tractor built to work. Tom stood outside the shed drinking coffee while he listened. That sound meant something. Reliability, predictability, peace of mind. Emily climbed down from the cab and walked over. "Well," she said, brushing dirt from her gloves, "I'll give you this." Tom raised an eyebrow. "They're solid tractors." Tom smiled slightly. "I told you, but," she added quickly, "they still need upgrades." I expected that. GPS guidance. At least. Tom nodded. Already looked into it. Emily blinked. You did? Installation kit runs about 8,000 per tractor. She stared at him for a moment. You've been planning this longer than 2 weeks, haven't you? Tom shrugged. A little. Emily laughed softly. You're stubborn. Experience. They walked out toward the field together. The ground was beginning to warm. Planting season was only a few days away. For the next 2 weeks the farm ran like a machine, and for the first time in years, there were no breakdowns, no frantic midnight repairs, no lost planting windows. The tractors handled everything smoothly. The planters ran perfectly. Even Emily admitted the upgrade had made a difference. Not flashy, not brand new, but efficient, reliable, and paid for. One evening after a long day in the field, Emily and Tom sat on the tailgate of the pickup, watching the sun sink behind the barns. Something funny? Emily said. What's that? When I ordered those tractors, I thought I was saving the farm. Tom nodded slowly. Most people do. But I didn't realize something. What? Debt doesn't just buy equipment. She looked out at the fields. It buys pressure. Tom smiled faintly. That's a good way to say it. They sat in silence for a while. The sky slowly turned orange and purple. Then summer came, and with it, trouble. The rain stopped in June. At first, nobody worried. Kansas summers often ran dry for a few weeks, but then July arrived, and the heat came. With it, day after day, the temperature climbed above 100 degrees. The soil cracked, corn leaves curled like dry paper. Soybeans struggled to grow. Across the county, farmers started watching the sky the way sailors watch storms, waiting, hoping, praying. But the rain never came. By mid-July, it was clear. This wasn't just a dry spell. It was a drought, the worst one in nearly a decade. One afternoon, their neighbor Mark stopped by again. He climbed out of his truck, slowly. You guys holding up all right? He asked. Tom nodded. We'll survive. Mark kicked at the dirt beside the truck tire. My yields are already down 30%. Emily frowned. That bad? Probably worse. He looked toward the fields, and the bank still expects their payments. Tom knew what that meant. Mark had bought 2 brand new tractors the year before. Total loan, nearly $400,000. Monthly payment, $6,000, and the crops weren't going to cover it. Emily glanced at her father. Neither of them said anything, but both of them were thinking the same thing. If she had ordered those tractors, if Tom hadn't cancelled that call, they would be in the exact same situation. Later that night, Emily stood alone near the machine shed. The tractors sat quietly under the lights. 2 used machines, not glamorous, not expensive, but completely paid for. Tom walked up beside her. You're thinking about Mark. She nodded. That could have been us. Yes. Emily crossed her arms. I used to think the biggest risk in farming was outdated equipment. Tom shook his head slowly. No. What is it then? Debt. She looked at him. Because debt doesn't care about weather, he pointed toward the dry fields. Rain doesn't fall because you have a loan payment due. Emily let out a long breath. I finally understand what you were trying to teach me. Tom nodded quietly. Sometimes experience is the only teacher that works. By the end of the season, the numbers told the story clearly. Yields were down across the county, nearly 40% in some areas. Several farmers were forced to refinance equipment loans. 2. Farms nearby were sold entirely. Corporate buyers moved in, large operations buying land from families who had farmed there for generations. Emily watched it happen, and each time she saw another for sale sign at the edge of a field. She thought about that phone call, the one her father had made, cancelling the order, saving the farm. One evening in late fall, after harvest was finished, Emily sat with Tom again at the kitchen table. The same place where their argument had started, months earlier. She placed a folder in front of him. What's this? He asked. A business plan. Tom opened it. Inside were charts, financial projections, equipment plans, expansion strategies. Emily smiled slightly. Don't worry, he raised an eyebrow. No giant loans? No giant loans, Tom chuckled. Good. She leaned back in the chair. You know something interesting? What? My professors in college always said modern farming requires constant upgrading. Tom nodded. That's the theory. But none of them ever explained how farms actually survive bad years. Tom closed the folder slowly. That's because most of them never lived through one. Emily looked at him. You did? Yes. And now I have too. Outside the farmhouse window, the fields rested quietly under the evening sky. Another year finished, another season survived, and somewhere out in the machine shed, 2 tractors sat ready for whatever came next. Not the newest machines, not the most expensive, but strong enough, reliable enough, and most importantly, free. Free from banks, free from debt, free to keep the farm alive for another generation. Emily looked across the table at her father. You know something? What? That phone call you made, she smiled, might be the most important decision this farm ever saw. Tom shrugged modestly. Sometimes the smartest move a farmer can make, he glanced toward the fields, is simply refusing to buy something he can't afford. And with that, the Walker farm kept going, just like it had for generations. Because sometimes survival isn't about having the newest equipment. Sometimes it's about having the courage to say no.